the day are here. And it begins with Cesar getting the recording started. So thank you. I'm Lainey Denslow. I think I know everybody on the call except Stuart. I've just met you. Happy to meet you this morning. And I get to be the moderator for this morning's call. And as an author, it is always an honor and a thrill to be with other authors. And oh, Adrian Bray is here. Okay, Adrian, you have to say hello. He's coming because his accent will match the rest of the group. Doug Brunke, our CEO, do you want to say a few words before we roll into the heart of the meeting?
I'm not sure my accent matches Chicago or UK, unfortunately. I'm from New York, so but it's hard to pick up the accent. Thank you, Lainey. I have just the pure joy of working with Lainey on a fairly regular basis because she's in addition to all the great work and being an author and teaching people how Americans are, and her book, Working with Americans, she's also the Global Chamber San Francisco Advisory Board Chair. And she has like all sorts of things going on, including a wine event this Friday. If you can, it's 3:00 Pacific. It's 11 p.m. London. So that doesn't seem that late to have a glass of wine and learn about the wine industry. So Lainey, she's way more than an author, way more than a consultant. She's an extraordinary leader, and we just love working with her. And she's also put together an event in October in San Francisco with Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. So she is very global. So thanks for all that you do, Lainey. And this is going to be a great conversation today. Anything with Michael Quigley in it is a winner. So I'm waiting with bated breath for all of the authors. Thank you, Lainey, for leading.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for the overwhelming introduction. Good morning, Adrian. This is your first time at an authors meeting. We're glad to have you. And I want to introduce to the people who are new to these meetings, the woman who had the vision to start these authors meetings, and that's Gloria Peterson. Wave your hand. She's got on a beautiful red top. And we owe our thanks to Gloria, who had the vision that she's an accomplished multi-book author and had the vision that in the global tribe, there were probably other authors and that we should come together and share what we do and what we know and our stories. And here we are this morning. So everybody send Gloria a thank you note. All right, now here's what we're going to do. We have 3 outstanding, terrific. And I found out this morning, each of our 3 authors this morning has written more than 1 book, which is pretty unusual for this group. And each one has a new book, and that's what we're going to focus on. So our authors are Tamina Watson, wave your hand, and Michael Quigley, and Natalie Kelly. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the authors each to answer a series of questions. We'll start out with each of them answering the same questions. Then we'll take questions from the audience for a couple minutes, and then I'll ask them more questions. So we have to think about getting started. All right. So you've all read the bios on the global site. Gloria sent them out, LinkedIn profiles. So we're not going to waste our time reading about these 3 people in stuff that you can read online. I do, however, know a thing or 2 about each of the authors that I'll share with you. And we're going to begin with Michael, and then Tamina, and then Natalie. So Michael Quigley is the author of 2 books. Today we're going to focus on his newest book, Loving Leadership. Yes, hold them up, please, Michael. Lift them up again, because it's important to know that the covers, which are really outstanding, were designed by his brother. So that is really special. Thank you. Michael is a trainer, a teacher, and he also has learned to speak Spanish because he has a client whose employees, many of them speak Spanish, and he wanted to be able to convey his message in a language they understood. But when he's not been studying Spanish, he's also taken the time to get a brown belt in jujitsu. This is a very talented man. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you to start out by telling us why you wrote this book. As Tamina said, why this book? Why now? Who's your target audience? And what's one takeaway that you hope everybody takes from your book? Dana,
Okay.
if you look in the chat, you can see that Dana Austin, who is an executive director for the Global Chamber, has written a little commentary on Michael too. So everybody, all right, Michael, I'll stop. It's your turn.
Thank you, Lainey. This is quite unusual because I actually want to hear Tamina and Natalie's answers more than give my own answers, but okay. Why did I write a book on leadership? Because I've got something to say about it. Hopefully my fellow authors understand this. You write when you've got something to say, you've got insights, you've got ideas, you've got experience, you know. And I, after 6-7 years running a business, I had something to say on leadership, and it was as simple as that. Why did I write it? Because I had something to say, but also because the way I was training people, leading people, helping people seemed to resonate so strong with people. So to go into your second question as an audience, two really good definitions of leadership which stick with me. One is Anthony Iannarino, who's a sales trainer, and he says, if you're responsible for improving the future, you are a leader. And I love that. And then Doug also said on a previous event, when you're around people, you need to keep nothing in your head so you can respond to them in their needs that moment. That's a true leader. So if you think about that, we're all leaders as parents, as business owners, as authors. If you're trying to improve the future in whatever way you're trying to do, you are a leader. And then why I wrote it was because a lot of people get on board with that. But then if you actually said, well, how do you actually do that? What's your framework? What's your approach? What do you practically do? What do you not do? They'd probably say, go on courses, read blogs. There wasn't enough there, I don't think, in a cohesive whole. So the takeaway from it is firstly that, you know, you are a leader if you're trying to improve the future. You don't need a qualification. You know, John C. Maxwell's taught us that. But the final thing is that for me, and this is why I call it loving leadership, the greatest resource we all share is the love we have in our hearts, whether that's for our family, whether it's for a cause, whether that's for our world. And for me, it's baffled me in the last 6 years in business why people didn't tap into that in their leadership. You know, like what's fueling your leadership? Is it your money? Is it your time? Because they'll run out. And I didn't understand that disconnect. And then I thought, but then practically, you can't just say I love people. You've got to show it. And what have I experienced? How do I show it? And that's what the book is. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Tell us, who do you think is the most likely leader? And is there one takeaway that they could take from your book?
When you said the most likely leader, can you just clarify what you mean by that?
So are you thinking that your book will be most useful to a CEO of a company, the head of a team, an individual contributor? Who do you visualize picking it up and reading it?
It's an interesting question because originally I thought it'd be for new leaders, you know, junior managers, people who are kind of getting squeezed because they don't have 30 years experience, but they're not brand new. But having been getting feedback on it, I've had people as young as in their 20s and as old as in their 70s, you know, CEOs, people that have been there and done it and gone, this, I've actually got a review of it. And this guy said, if I had this book 40 years ago, I could have saved myself a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, is what he said. So fortunately, my material seems to be quite generic, meaning you can read into it and get different things depending on where you're at. And hopefully my fellow authors will agree on that. You know, when you write something good, you can come back to it. I know Tamina's done a second edition, and you come back to it in a different place and you get something else from it. So that's the way I like to try and write, you know, that evergreen way, that idea, rather than micro niche, because, you know, doesn't seem to kind of work for me. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for starting us off, Michael. Now, Tamina has written a book. I have to always look at it to get it right. Startup Visa, Immigration Visa Guide for Startup and Founders. This is a new edition of a book she wrote before, and she's also written another book. And when she has some time that is not writing books and working as an immigration lawyer, she's fascinated by birds. And so she has a passion for bird photography, which is unique among, I think, our group on this call. And maybe if we had time, we'd have you show us some of your photos, but let's see where we are time-wise. But now, Tamina, Would you answer the same question? Why this book? Why now? Who's the target reader, and what do you hope the takeaway will be?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to Doug for creating such an incredible group of people here, and Lainey and Gloria for organizing, and Cesar. I'm so honored to be here, particularly with Michael and Natalie as panelists. I was blown away by Michael when I first met him, and I just wanted to keep speaking and speaking. So as you can tell from my accent, I am from the UK. I was a barrister in the UK, which I wouldn't normally say in the US because it meant nothing. But I had to requalify when I came to the United States, and I started to practice as an immigration attorney in Seattle, Washington. But what that meant was I had to requalify. But first of all, I immigrated. I was born and raised in London. I didn't need to go through any of those processes before. So I learned what the pain points are from that. But when I requalified, immigration was not going to be the subject I wanted to practice. I wanted to practice different things. I thought barristers would, naturally practice trial or litigation issues. So, but long story short, I had lots of roadblocks, and immigration kept coming my way and coming my way. And I kept saying no until I said, okay, you know what? I'll just do this for 5 years. And then I did it the first day, and I thought, oh, I was meant to do this all my life. And the universe kept pushing it towards me until I succumbed. And so that was 2006. I moved here in 2005. And very quickly, I realized the immigration laws are broken in this country. No matter who I'm trying to help, whether it's a family member or business or a startup founder. And I was helping a lot of startup founders without realizing that was becoming a niche. I live in Seattle, where there's a lot of technology companies and lots of innovative ideas that create companies from scratch. And I realized I needed to advocate for change. I became the voice for my clients. So my very first book was actually the first of the series that has now become a series. It was a policy book saying why we need a new visa category for startup founders. And that came in 2015. But then we had a different administration where I became a person of leadership in our community, where immigration, you think of immigration and people come to me. So I had to put the startup visa aside and then work on just helping people if they've been separated from their children or they're stuck at the airport and what have you. That's the stories of my second book. But then fast forward the clock to now, we have an administration that really does want to change the laws, but the laws are not changing. That's why I wrote a second edition of my first book about we need to change the law. This is where we stand. But then came the layoffs in 2022. And I had two realizations. Number one, I cannot advocate continuously without seeing change, and the people that I want to serve are not being served. So I need to empower them even more. How do I do that? So I started to write this book, which would become this book that it is today, a guidebook. So anybody who's trying to come to the US can actually be able to demystify the law and understand these are the 5 options I have, and this is the best one for me. So I started to write the book, but as an author and an expert, there are lots of things that you juggle with in your mind, and I had a lot of things happen, so I couldn't get to the end of the book. But then the 2022 layoffs happened. And they were mass layoffs that were happening not just in Seattle, but around the country. And when immigrants on work visas are laid off, you have to leave the United States. So that compelled me to pick up the book again and finish it. And I felt so compelled that I was, while having a tremendously busy period in my life, I was waking up at 4 a.m., 6 a.m., 12 a.m., figuring out when can I get pockets of time to finish this book, because these people in the US have limited time to figure out what they need to do next. So that became the book, and I released it on July 4th. It became a bestseller on Amazon for several weeks. And they're holding the #1 position. And then just recently, Barnes & Noble in my local area allowed me to have a book signing. It's been very well received, and it's really going to change lives. A client of mine told me, similar to what Michael said, is I wish I had this book 5 years ago. It's very simple to read. Most lawyers will write lawyerly language and throw a lot of law in it so that you can't really get to the actual point. But my client said to me, oh, you know what? A high school child could actually understand this. And it validates what I was trying to do, so that somebody in, Timbuktu, different parts of the world, different parts of this particular group who want to expand into the US or stay in the US will be able to actually empower themselves, because knowledge is power. I can be a better lawyer for somebody who is armed with all the information, so that we can be a team to get them the success they need.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Tamina. And now, Natalie, having given you a few minutes to breathe, because you were in, one of the things about Natalie is the new book, Take Your Company Global, New Rules for International Expansion, actually officially launches next Tuesday. So consider that we're getting a preview. But last night, people in Paris got a preview before our preview, because she did a book launch there and then somehow made her way to Dublin to be on this call today with us. Thank you. And Michael, you'll be particularly interested to know this bit of her previous life. Is she was a Spanish language translator earlier in way earlier in her career. And I know you've done a number of podcasts, and one of the things you said on one of your podcasts caught my attention, and that was about the importance of curiosity when you're expanding globally. And not everybody talks about that. So thanks for adding that in. And now, would you tell us about this new book that's launched last night, launching next Tuesday?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not normally this international, I will say. I'm normally in the Boston area. So thanks, Lainey, and thanks to all of you for organizing and for being here. It's really lovely to be part of this group and to meet fellow authors who I am just nodding and agreeing with and loving the things you're saying and why you wrote your books and why now. So why I wrote this book now. I actually didn't write it now. I wrote it a long time ago, or I started to write it a long time ago, and there wasn't really a market for it. So when I was working to pitch it to publishers, they didn't really see much potential revenue, value in this book, because there are books about going global. And my spin on it was everything has changed. Now that we're in the digital age, you're global the moment you have a website. You can't go global the same way you used to. It used to be international expansion for a lot of companies meant like a heavy lift going into a new market with a lot of upfront costs and things like that. And it's happening more continuously now, that people can do more things online and access experiences online and through apps and all of these things. And so my background is I've worked in technology for the last 12 years in B2B SaaS, which is software as a service. So companies that sell software to each other on a subscription model. And I worked for one of the very large public SaaS companies, subscription-based software companies, called HubSpot, and helped HubSpot expand internationally all over the world. And so what I noticed as I was leading these initiatives, and really appreciate the work that Tamina is talking about, because we had a lot of immigration lawyers and people helping us with relocating folks. And the more countries you add and the more entities you add, the more complexity there is and the more rules there are to follow. And we got very familiar with US immigration law, Irish immigration law, because we have a big office in Ireland, France, Germany, Japan, everywhere we expanded into, it was like the complexity kept multiplying as we would relocate people from all over the world to all of our different offices. The war for talent is real in tech, or it was. Now there's a lot of availability thanks to the layoffs. So up and down, up and down. But the reason I wrote it was I was seeing all this unfold as I was doing the job of expanding internationally with HubSpot. And I realized not many people have access to this viewpoint and this particular knowledge of all the different facets of how all these things are interconnected, you know, from setting up your entity to having a bank account to having local tax, requirements, and even just IT issues and things like that are all considerations for expansion. And how you go global depends on what your ultimate goal is. So I wanted to write a guidebook for business leaders, whether they're entrepreneurs with a one-person business or whether it's a large public company like where I was working and a leader of a function there. I wanted to give this information to people to understand how things have changed, what you need to do differently, how you need to go about this topic. And long story short, when the pandemic hit, suddenly publishers were interested in this topic because the pandemic forced everybody to work remotely. And a lot of people said, oh, I'm going to go work from wherever. And so interest in the topic grew. And so finally, some publishers said, oh, yeah, maybe we should publish a book on this topic. So we got the book, we got interest, and I finished it. I completed writing it about a year ago. And because this process takes so long now, it's launching next week. We just did a pre-launch event in Paris, as Lainey mentioned. So it's exciting. I'm very happy to be here and to see the topics that Tamina and Michael have covered, because I actually talk about being a global leader and leadership in a global community, a global company. And definitely the people aspect is huge. And if you can't get the right people in the right roles, then you can't grow. And I'm actually advocating that you want to hire people with international experience, and you want to relocate people, and you want to, sponsor them from an immigration perspective. So I think all of our topics are very interconnected.
Thank you. And it is wonderful to have authors whose books are interconnected and so much to be shared. Let's take a minute and see, are there any questions from the audience at the moment? If not, I have a zillion other questions for our authors. So I don't see any hands up, and I didn't see anything in the chat. Stuart, hand up just in time.
Under the wire. I'm always interested in how authors approach what they leave out of the books. So for us, our approach is very much using books as conversation starters. So we're spending a lot of time encouraging people to get that first version done and the introduction to the conversation on the pages, but then there's always the opportunity to continue it. So the three of you guys going down the route of writing it yourselves and all of this information that's in your head, how do you draw the line between what to include and what not to include?
How about Natalie? You were the last speaker and you're nodding your head. So why don't we ask Natalie to answer that, and then Tamina, and then Michael?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much I wanted to include, and I did have to remove a lot. I tend to write long and edit down, and I did end up editing down a lot. It was fairly easy to figure out what to take out, though, because I kept asking myself, what's going to be most valuable to the reader? And while I'm passionate about the topic of localization and adapting your product and adapting your processes for international markets, that isn't necessarily what my average reader is going to want to know about. And in fact, it may be too advanced of a topic for them. So it's funny because I thought I constrained myself, and I only had one topic where I talk about localization, translation, and globalization, internationalization. And I thought, okay, I've limited it to one chapter. And one of my reviewers, who was a business leader, and said, oh, this is a book that would have helped me in so many different roles that I had over the years. I wish I would have had, similar to what Michael and Tamina said, I wish I would have had this information. He said, but the one chapter that I didn't really get was the one on localization. So I was like, oh, I only did one chapter on it, and that one is the one he didn't like. So I did have to kind of pull some things back and rewrite that and make it even more accessible. But to me, this is similar to what Michael was talking about. You want your material to be accessible to a large number of people. And my book is really about making experiences accessible to people. I think that's why we go global in the first place. So I can't then write a book that isn't accessible. That's the thing that I'm kind of preaching. So that was, basically what I had to take out at the very end. Even though I thought I took out everything unnecessary, I was wrong. So always learning.
And that actually takes us in another direction that we'll all ask next is, do you have people read it before it gets published? So who are your reader? But Michael, do you want to answer the question about what did you have to leave out, or how do you
Yeah.
decide what to leave out?
Sure, happy to. So 3 things to answer your question, Stuart. The first is what I call splurge. You just write, just get it down on the page. Don't edit it as you go. That's just my personal say. You get it out because too many people think about marketing, think about how they're going to edit it, what the people with. It's too much pressure. Just write something, you know. The second thing is something I learned from Stephen King. This guy sort of says, Stephen, how do you consistently write something of high quality? He says it's called kill your darlings. He says when he's finished something, he thinks it's amazing. He says put it in a drawer and don't look at it for a month because you're going to think it's brilliant because you've written it. And I was like, ooh, and that takes the emotion out of it. And he says if it's still good, it'll be good in a month. I really have to watch out for that because when I write something, I think it's good because it's come from me, right? It's an ego thing, but that's really helped. And then the third thing is once I've done that, I then consider my reader. So a really good piece of advice I try and use my social media is this person said, if it doesn't have any value to somebody beyond yourself, take it out. You know, are you writing it for you? Are you writing it for them? So for my book, for example, it was quite short, my first one. So this is really sad, but I just wanted to write something that was a little bit longer. So like once I knew I'd reached that point, you know, 20,000 words is minimum, go past there. I was like, right. And then, you know, like the ladies were saying, you've got something you have to say and you kind of know when you've said it. You can always add a bit more. You can always take a bit out. You can revise it like Tamina did, you know, but it's beautiful. There's this moment where you just kind of like, it's not perfect, but I think I've done it. And we all, you know, we get there in different ways. So hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
I love the idea of putting it away for a month. Tamina, I'm coming to you anyway, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to pick it up from Michael on the readership. Because and I'm going to tell you a story of my first book, actually. You know, I had this deep compulsion to write this book about why we need a new visa category for founders in this country and startups. So, and I'd never written a book before. I had written many, many, many blog posts that gave me the naive courage to write a book, only to realize, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I finished this first edition of the book, the first edition, rough draft, and I did give it to a lawyer to read. And when she came back, she said to me, you know, Tamina, I think this needs to be 2 books. And one is about policy and one is the how-to. It only took me 15 years to figure out what she meant by the how-to. That's the current book. But when I sat down, when I was in that moment, I was only thinking about policy leaders. I was thinking about the lawmakers who needed to know what the law is and why it needs to change. And I was giving a lot of examples of the law going bad in cases, but that's what she picked up on, saying, I think you need to tell them how to do it. But because I was so focused on the audience, I took away anything that would distract the audience from why the policy needs to change. So picking up from Michael, the readership is very important. Who are you trying to address? And so then when it came to this next book, what did I leave out? To be honest, I didn't leave anything out. If anything, I thought if I do not empower my client to the fullest extent possible, I'm not doing the job I have set out to do. And so I think you think about the reader and what you need to accomplish, and that becomes a goal of your writing.
Okay, lots of good answers. Thanks for the questions, Stuart. You got us going. I'm curious. Gloria has her hand up. Okay, your turn.
Yeah, I really wanted to answer that question because when I wrote my first book, it was massive. And then I started taking things out and putting it into another folder with a topic that worked for it. The next thing, and then that created the second book. So what I took out was book 2. And then when I started working on book 2, again, I had new ideas coming in. It was massive again. So then I had to create book 3 to take that material. And the one book I thought was going to have the least amount of information because I did the least number of seminars on that topic actually turned out to be the biggest one. So, you know, what you take out, save it and then reassess it later to see, is there 1 or 2 or 3 more books in this information? Because the thing is, your writings, you're sharing your knowledge, you're sharing your experience, you're sharing your personal growth, 1 or all 3 of them, but they are your legacy. They are your legacy. And that's what you're sharing with the world because the legacy lives on. If it's in a book, once it's up on Amazon, you can't take it down. It's there permanently. So your word, your experience, your personal growth, everything's there forever. And that's why you want to keep writing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gloria. A lot of people are going to actually listen to this because it's being recorded and it'll be on the Global Chamber, I think, YouTube. So for those of people who are thinking about writing books, often the question is, how do you get started? So can we just quickly have all three of you, starting with Tamina and then Natalie and then Michael, tell us, do you write on a computer? Do you retire to a cabin in the woods and write? Do you dictate it and then have somebody transcribe it? Can you just give us a quick little, what's your process of writing? And Tamina, do you want to start us off?
When I wrote my second book, every book has had its own journey. And when I'm writing, how compelled I'm feeling in that moment. And I can remember those moments very vividly still. It's those journeys that stay with you. But when you are consistently writing, you've got to find a way that works for you. And for me, it's the mornings. I would wake up and write something every morning. Not only was I writing this book, but I had 2 columns on a monthly basis. So I had deadlines. So if I wasn't continuously writing, I wouldn't be able to do that. But I would say that add that every now and again you get inspired. You might be sitting in a coffee shop or walking somewhere and you get inspired and you think you might remember it later. But honestly, I was like, oh, didn't I have a good idea? And then I just don't remember. So I've started to record every now and again. If I have something good that I want to capture, I'll record it and save it. None of it has to be pretty. You're not sharing it with anybody. Just do a brain dump and come back to it. I describe it as a work of art. It's words are the paint, and you are the paintbrush, and you can put things around as you need, as long as the paint is on the canvas, and that's what the words are.
Okay, thanks. Natalie, what about you?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Tamina said, and I'll just pick up on that as well. I mean, blocking specific times is very important to me. I started every single book with an outline, and I basically broke it into sections that I wanted to cover, and I put the way I do blog posts and I do chapters in a book is kind of similar, or sections of a chapter. I ask a question first and then I answer the question. So like, what question do I want this to answer? Usually the question I will then turn into a headline, so if I'm saying what 3 actions should you take, it's like the 3 actions you should take, but just the act of having it as a question makes it very engaging, I think, for me and for the reader, so that I'm actually speaking to them with specific answers to that question, so that it's very orderly in my head in terms of the outline. So I always start with an outline. I always phrase the headers, the chapters, etc., as questions, and some of those are sub questions under a chapter, and then I basically answer. And I found myself a lot of times, like Tamina mentioned, if I was brilliant or non-brilliant ideas would occur to me often when I'm exercising or when I'm walking or when I'm doing something else, but is part of the writing process, but isn't actually writing. I would be, or sometimes driving, and I would think of something and I would send myself a voice memo with that idea. Or sometimes I would use a tool so I can get an auto transcription, really quickly of that idea. And then I would usually rewrite it quite heavily, because my raw voice memos are not that great when you read them. But that was really helpful for me to fill in, those gaps. And then often I would move things around, realize, oh, this belongs in this section. And there's a lot of reconfiguration that goes on, I think, with writing a book, at least for the 3 that I've written, which were all on very different topics, but all kind of in the thread of international growth, international communication.
All right, then back to you, Michael.
So I'll give you 5 things, really. First is make it a habit. If you write every day, you're just normalizing writing like brushing your teeth. I write every single day, have done for about 8 years. I write in the morning, write in the evenings, capture all sorts of folders. I won't bore you with the details, but make it a habit. If you write as a habit, amazing stuff comes from that. I personally capture it on my phone because it's with me all the time. The speed of it, like the lady was saying, you've got to capture it in that moment. Like, ugh. And then once I've started writing, it's funny. I actually like writing on my phone now. It's weird. I write everything on my phone, blogs, everything. But then when it comes to editing and looking at it, I will then take that to the computer and then look at it on a bigger screen, because trying to edit on your phone is just death. So phone to computer is my approach. I set timers. I write in bursts, so whether it's 20 minutes, but you know, if the timer goes off and I'm still in the zone, I'll carry on. But there's nothing worse than sitting down and going, you know, it's almost really do it backwards kind of thing, saying, right, this is my time. So by the time you come to it, you're ready to do it. The fourth thing is self-reflection, as everybody's kind of said. Your insights, your ideas, they don't just come in moments. You read back things you said from days, weeks, months, years, like Gloria was saying. It's this thread of consciousness, and you'll go, I'll have that. But the fifth thing, which I thought could really help you, because it did help me, not so much as a writer, but just as a creative person, is a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way. And she says two really good things. One I've already said, which is write every day. But the second is she says, take yourself on an artist date, like once a week or once a month. Like just do something that feeds your creativity, whether it's watching, you know, bird watching, whether it's expanding globally with HubSpot, which is amazing, by the way. You know, like whatever it is, for me, it's time with my dog, you know. But it's just that thing that makes you feel vital and alive, because whatever that is, it's the same thing you're tapping into when you're writing. So I love that idea that no matter how you are creative, because everybody's creative, feed it, you know, do something with it. And I've done also, you know, take yourself to the cinema, something like that. So yeah, there's 5 things, but I had to get that book recommendation in, because I think for new writers, it will just free you up to just be like, oh, I can do this, because she writes in a very, very accessible way.
Okay, thanks all three. Now another topic, how you got the words on the paper is fascinating. But how did you choose? I don't know whether you, of all three of you, decided to self-publish, went with a traditional publisher, some version in between. So who wants to start this round? Raise your hand of the three of you wants to talk about that. And at the same time, can you answer, who did you have read or did you have somebody else besides you read before you handed it off to be printed? So did you hire an editor? Did you have a best friend read it? I co-wrote a book with a friend, and we divided up the chapters and we sort of were each other's editors. And that was really a helpful way to do it. So who looked at your book before, or did anybody before you send it off to be printed? So Tamina, you want to start us off?
I think the book writing process also requires a village, because you cannot be objective about what you have said. And if you have expertise in an area, you know the lingo, but you don't know if you're actually conveying what the layperson needs to understand. So by the way, I just want to mention a space is important. Wherever you do your daily habit, do it in a particular space. My husband just really recently created me a writing room. I wanted to just make sure that I shouted that out, because without that writing room, I wouldn't have had my book, the latest one. But coming back to the village, it was important for me to have an editor who could understand and work with me. And I had a copy editor, and I self-published. When I first had my first book, I thought I needed a traditional publisher. I tried, and I found a publisher who would publish my book, but they said, this is 2014-ish, and they said, we will only do an ebook. And I knew I was writing a policy book that I needed to leave with lawmakers and policymakers. An ebook would not be read. And so, having soul searched, I said, I think I need to self-publish, because then I can actually have a hard copy in my hand. So since then, I've been self-publishing. It gives me more control over when I'm going to launch, what I'm going to do with it. I don't have to wait 2 years to get published, because a lot of my topics are time sensitive. So I have been self-publishing. And how has anybody read it? Yes, I think the more books I write, the more important it becomes for other people to read it. In this particular book, I'm very proud to say I have about 40 editorial reviews inside the book, because I needed industry leaders to essentially look at the book and say, yes, this is the book that only Tamina could write, because of all the things we've done over time. And so I think, you know, how you are going to have somebody read is a strategy matter. Is it your friend reading it, or is it an industry leader reading it? What are they going to, you know, get out of doing this? Everybody needs to have something. And so I think it all comes down to your goals, your strategy for your book, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great. Who wants to pick it up? Natalie or Michael? Natalie, unmuting yourself, so go ahead.
Sure. So like Tamina, my first book was self-published, and I did like that I had a lot of control into the timing and I didn't have to wait. I originally actually had a small British publisher that was going to publish it, but then due to lots of different reasons I won't go into here, it didn't happen, and I ended up kind of having to self-publish it to get it done. And it was also kind of a small niche audience that I was writing for. That first book was on telephone interpreting, which back then was a pretty popular way to do remote interpreting before we had Zoom and, you know, platforms where we could connect online the way we do now. But the second book I actually had pitched for years. I got a literary agent and I tried pitching, and rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter. It was very, very painful for years to hear nobody cared about this topic. Nobody wanted to know about this topic. And that book was it was on about translators and interpreters and the role they play in society. And I really felt it was important to shine a light on that profession. So nobody cared. And then I teamed up with a friend and colleague who also really liked that topic and wanted to write about it with me. And suddenly then I gained his platform because he had a newsletter that was popular, and he had a website, and he had, you know, various different audiences that he could reach on top of mine. And then we thought, maybe we could start pitching this and seeing if maybe now someone would be interested. So timing is really important. I want to emphasize that for anyone who's looking at writing a book. Sometimes it's the timing. You heard me say with my new book, it was also a matter of timing. Like pre-pandemic, nobody cared, and then later people cared. Anyway, so I still was not happy with my literary agent, who I felt like didn't get it, didn't believe in my book enough, you know. So I didn't want to go that route again. So I started to pitch editors directly myself on LinkedIn. And I pitched one who I really thought had a cool and quirky style. She was very funny. She would have hilarious things that she said on Twitter. And I was like, oh, I'd like to work with her. And so I pitched her, and she wrote back and she said, I love this idea. And she was at an imprint of Penguin Random House called Perigee. And so they bought the rights to the book. I did have to hire a literary agent, though, to help me negotiate, because the legal terms were so confusing with intellectual property and stuff. I didn't feel comfortable doing it myself. So I was like, I want to get somebody who knows what they're doing, so I don't, you know, give away all my rights. So I actually just brought the offer to a literary agent and said, can you help me negotiate this? And so that person was my agent who helped me land the next book, which is actually published by a business publisher called Barrett Kohler. And they publish a lot of pretty well-known authors like Ken Blanchard and others that I'm sure you've heard of, business authors, but they only publish for business audiences. And so that felt like a perfect fit for this book, which is about taking your business global. And so I was really happy to work with them. They're also a B Corp. They're an independent publisher. They try to do good in this world, and it made me happy to be able to work with them. So that's my path for those three books. Very different in each case. Oh, I think Lainey, you're on mute now.
Interesting how flexible and creative you've been in finding ways to get your books out there. So thanks for sharing that. There is not just one way, and even for yourself writing multiple books, there wasn't just one way to get it done. And what about you, Michael?
Yeah, so as if to prove there isn't one way to get it done, mine was completely different as well. So the first book, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Seriously, so I've got a master's in English, so obviously I can write, but it was before I even had a business. I was working as a personal trainer, but I had something to say on mental health in relation to physical health. So long story short, my mother sent a 4,000-word transcript to Austin Macaulay Publishers in London, and I was getting ready for, like Natalie said, I was getting ready for the rejection. She said, "Why'd you do that?" And like a week later, they said, "Can we have the full manuscript?" It's not supposed to work. Like, what? So that was the first one, right? But the second one, very interesting. I'm very fortunate. My father's got like 40 years experience in leadership, and I trust him. I do. And I said, will you look at this? Because I know he can be cold. And we literally sat together and edited, and it was brutal. but really good. And then what I did was I thought, because it was really important to me, the quality of it, really important. So he has a mentor who's also called Kevin, and he's in Australia, and he's a leadership consultant of 50 years experience, incredible man. I sent it to him like, if you like this, would you please tell me? And he fortunately liked it. He said, I'll write you a forward, and it's on the front of the book, and he's done, he's done this thing. And for me, I don't care about anybody else. I respect that man so much. For him to say this is essential reading for leaders, I was like, oh my goodness. And then when the publishers got it after going through the three of us, they actually wrote back and said like how good it was before they were going to publish it. And I thought, you didn't do that the first book. No, they didn't say that the first time. So I was like, I must be getting better, So I think that's very, very important for people to understand. It's like, you don't have a clue, you learn. And then you think, oh, I wish I'd done that before, and you get better and better and better. But the good news is, if you ever want to work with a publisher, is the hardest one is your first one. From a commercial point of view, once you got 2, 3, 4, like as Gloria knows, it's just easier and easier. Because if you like that, you'll love this. So that was beautiful. So yeah, my route quite unusual, but I guess there's no one route. Like we've all just found out with each other.
Wow, that is a heck of a story. And what a story of actual bravery, because I don't know about the other authors like everyone on this call, but it always feels risky, especially the first time you're handing your book off to somebody who isn't part of it to read and to see what they say. The first time I started writing a book and I had all these notes and I'd put everything together and I was so excited. And I went to show it to one of my friends about, look how much I've accomplished. And I looked down on it and it was just gibberish to anybody who wasn't me knowing what I'd done. And, she just looked at it and said, keep going, like go away from my office and keep going back to work. So one thing that, Michael, I think it's interesting that you mentioned about sort of that sense of risk the first time you share your creation with somebody else. And I see Natalie nodding your head. It's an act, a real act, I think, of bravery that to put it out there and for all the authors to see what's going to happen to your book. Gloria, this is a good little stopping point. We'll come back to these authors, but I want to take a minute and have Gloria share what's coming next month. So can you just give us that little highlight before we run out of time, and then we can come back to the authors.
Okay, I will share that, but I think we also need to let the people who are participating bring them back to ask questions if they have any. Sarita Jackson will be our moderator. And for details on these amazing authors that we've got coming up in October, certainly you can visit the event page, the Global Chamber event page, because they're all posted. Everything's all there. But we have Anna Rosalind Runland. We have Kathy Fiat, who we've had in the past, and she's the one that, on the other side, she's the one you go to when you want to write. So she'll give you that knowledge, the writing knowledge. She does editing. And Donald Laughlin is also going to be present next month in October. And again, their background is on the Global Chamber event page, and we look forward to another amazing session like we're having today.
Okay, thanks a lot. I can see a couple of people are having to hop off, but before anybody else hops off, is there anybody who has a question that you want to pose? If you would wave your hand or put up your virtual hand. And if not, okay, I don't see any hands up at the moment, but that's all right. And then authors, could you tell us just quickly, we've got just a few minutes, what your approach to marketing the book, getting the word out? How are you telling people that the book exists? And Natalie, I can see you nodding your head, so I'm going to ask you to start, and then we'll go to Michael and back to Tamina.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a struggle because I just started a new role a couple of months ago, and so I'm trying my best to balance everything. My obligation as a writer to help the publisher make sure they recover their printing costs, but also, my responsibility to my new employer. So I'm spending my time very carefully lately. But I do a lot of writing to promote the book. I just published an article in Harvard Business Review a couple weeks ago that is based on the book. I've been publishing a lot in a lot of other outlets. I really kind of, with every book that I've done, I try to amp up the writing in every place that I can and try to, submit articles, which again puts you up for rejection and lots of editing and lots, but I love writing, so I don't mind doing that. That's my number one way of promoting it. I also, for anyone who's writing a book, I would suggest reach out to your contacts and ask them, you want to team up? I just did this author event last night in Paris, and I thought, well, this will be a fun way to launch a book on going global when I, can launch it in a market that isn't even where it's sold, because you can't buy it in France. You can only really buy it in the US from a US retailer. But I had a friend who, works at a company, and I've known the company and her for a long time, and they're based in France. So, she said, oh, you could come and do an event for our customers and, talk about the book, because it's a similar customer base that's interested in this. So that was a good way for me to get some interest beyond my typical audience and try to get the word out. I also did a launch squad on social media, and I said, hey, if anybody wants to help me launch the book, I'll send you a copy in advance if you're willing to write a review during launch week and post reviews on Amazon and things like that and help get the word out. That would be great. And so a lot of just friends, people I've helped over the years, colleagues, joined my launch squad, and now I've got a couple hundred people who are going to help me launch it next week. So that's good. Yeah, I'm really grateful for all those relationships that I've invested in over the years and not asked for anything, because now I'm asking them for that one little thing. And it's nice that people are stepping up to help me. So
I can testify that your launch squad works. At least I was on a call with another group, and Catherine Bussman was on the call, and she had just gotten a copy of your book, and she was so excited about it, and she told everybody on that call. So your squad is out there working on your behalf. That's an interesting way to do it. Tamina, do you want to pick it up, and then Michael?
Each book has had its own journey, again, in how I have talked about it, launched it, and so forth. But as Michael said, you get better and better, and you understand what you need to do. So I've similarly had some people help me when on your launch week. That week is very important for making sure that you can get on various lists. And so I've done that through my community, both inside work and outside work. I have typically written a lot about the book that comes out, except I haven't done that for this one quite yet. I think finding your audience that needs your book, finding them. And at this point, I have some contacts have come to me saying, will you please teach us what you're writing in your book? And so I think you have to be flexible in what comes your way, but you also have to have strategies in how you're going to move forward. And it's a little bit of everything. Everybody in your network has to be part of your launch squad, basically.
Yeah, that's true. Michael.
Yes. I'll give you 7 things, right? First one, have fun with it. Seriously, have fun marketing. If you're not going to have fun marketing it, it's going to come across. So pictures, variety, like Tamina was saying, embrace variety, all sorts of different ways. Secondly is, I like to share with my family. I have pictures of my mum with it, my dog with it. Start small and see it going on. People seem to not like people that pretend like they've started, finished. You know what I mean? People like to see the journey. They like to see how you're getting better and better, and they can track it back. So third, book reviews on Amazon are golden, absolutely golden. Fourth thing, I did something to really challenge myself. Got a podcast, and I dedicated a whole season, 12 episodes, to my book, to both of them. So I did 6 episodes where I revisited it and said, do I still believe in this stuff? Can I expand on it without ruining the book? It was really challenging. And then for my new book that only just come out, I was like, can I expand on the 6 areas without spoiling the book? So that's really cool. Just bear in mind, if you're a writer, you can talk and vice versa. Fifthly, get pictures of your readers with the book. If you're promoting yourself with the book, it's like, yeah, but you've written it. If you've got somebody else with it, right? It's true though, people are more interested. The 6th one, which really, really I do in all my marketing, is when people give you reviews and things like the sentences, pay attention to the wording, because they'll say things that you'd have never expected them to say, and the exact words really mean something to you. So when people say, you know, what's it like, you can quote those people that this person said this person said this. It's talking on your behalf. And the last thing, which is a testament to today, is build relationships with influential people and authors, because they'll challenge you, they'll support you. You know, this whole program, I remember when Gloria started, it's absolutely amazing. And so just being around those people is a form of marketing, but I don't see it in that way. I see it more as just being part of a community, you know. So yeah, there's my 7 things for you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you all. That is just spectacular. So I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat that say how much everybody has enjoyed today's session. And that's really a tribute to our 3 authors who have come to us with such openness, so much joy and excitement about what you've done, and willingness to share so freely. Very grateful to all of you. We have a couple of minutes and we're going to end so that everybody can get a breath before they join their next call. This is sort of our gift to you, is a few minutes to go, oh my God, I heard so much. I don't know how to process all of that. So I'm going to turn to Doug to see if he has any final words that he wants to share. But as the moderator, I want to say huge thanks to Mina and to Natalie and to Michael for all the generous sharing today. And Doug, I'm turning it back to you.
4 amazing authors, including you, Lainey, and a lot of the reason why this one was so successful is your moderation and facilitation. Thank you for being an expert, not just on Americans, but on people, and being able to hurt all sorts of folks. It was amazing. And I do want to say for next month, I looked at the listing. It isn't complete, so we need to finish it. But one of the speakers there is Anna Rosling of Gapminder. The story of getting Anna, it was about a 10-year journey, because her father, Hans Riesling, is one of the world iconators world, educating people on the value of global and information about global. We almost always, as he said, have the wrong impression of the world, almost always. And so he's devoted his life to educating people that the world is good, the world is great. He unfortunately passed away, but for many years I tried to reach him and get him connected, even during the early Global Chamber years. He passed away, and then there were years of me trying to find a way to get to his family, who had taken on the mantle. And finally Anna replied to me earlier this year, and we got her for October. So this is about a 10-year journey of an amazing family of people who've not only great authors, but are really made a great impact on the world. So back to you, Lainey. Definitely don't miss next month as well.
All right, I'll second that. It's a great book. It'll be exciting to hear what she has to say along with the other authors. And I promised you a minute, and I'm going to give you 2. Gloria, I see your hand up. So
yeah, I'm just gonna point to Dana, because she has something amazing coming up in December to help authors write their book. So Dana, if you want to share that a little bit.
I think
My voice is a little hoarse, but I'm going to do my best. But Lainey, this was phenomenal. I agree with Dwayne. Just seems like each session gets better and better. And thank you, Gloria, for really just having that in your heart to start this. And as a author and writer's coach, we host our annual conference in Puerto Rico every December. And we're inviting you. We have at least 6 Global Chamber authors and leaders, including Cesar and Gloria and Stephanie, myself, Nicole, that will be speaking. So you all are welcome to join us. It's a Create and Escape Writers Conference in Puerto Rico, December 7th through 10th. And I put the link there, as well as a link for a platform that we use for our writing when I coach my authors, and it helps you to get your book out. I love that what Michael has shared, Tahina, and sorry, I just forgot the other lady's name for a second, and just your process. And this platform link I share you, it makes it so much easier and succinct. So whatever we can do to support you, to join us, or on your journey, we're here for it. Thank you, Lainey.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks very much. And thank you everybody for being here today, and hope to see you all next month. So thank you very much, and wishing you a good day or evening, depending on where you are. Bye.